So today guys, I'm going to be showing you how to make just a really simple groove, just based off of using samples rather than synthesizers and complex sequences. It's just going to be showing you how to make a sequence really using a polyrhythm and just using some drum samples really, rather than having to rely on synthesizers. So to start off, I just want to show you that I've done most of the sounds using 808 sounds. So I have used the 909 kick because that always just sounds the best for me within techno, in my opinion. But for the tom sound I've got here, that's an 808 low tom, and then I've got an 808 rim shot here, and then I've got this random percussive type sound, and then for the hi-hats I've got some 808 open and closed hats and just a 909 offbeat closed hat. So it's really simple. So as always, I've processed my 909 kick very much the same as I normally do, which I've showed you in previous videos. So you see there, really simple. Just EQ'd it, so I've taken off all the bottom end below 30 Hz. I've comped it so that I'm just bringing out a bit of a transient, and I've put a rumble reverb on, which all I've done there is I've just picked a reverb that I like within hybrid reverb, which was the Textures Cloud. I've turned the wet and dry down to 25%, and I've EQ'd it so that it's only the low low end basically that you can hear from it, so it just rumbles. So that's it for the kick. For the hats and everything, I've just processed all these hats the same as I've showed you on previous videos, where I've just basically high passed them, put some delay on just to add a bit of variation, and I've compressed them, and that's pretty much the same for all of these hi-hats. I've also added a clap, which I've processed that a little bit differently, but I've just put different reverb on, I've comped it, and I've EQ'd it, and that's pretty much it. But one thing I have done is I've actually grouped the hi-hats and the clap all together, and the advantage of that is that I could actually put a group of effects on, essentially. So all I've done is I put an EQ on here, but I just didn't really feel the need to use it. I just put it on by default, just if I thought I needed to, but I didn't use it. But I've compressed the sound, so I've used two compressors, one for bringing out the pop of each sound within there, and also I've added a second one just to sidechain off the kick drum, so it just sounds like this when I solo it. So yeah, pretty good. And then I've got the main three things that I wanted to show you today. So first thing is I've got a low tom here from an 808. And all that's happening here is that it's actually, the main thing it's doing is it's playing a polyrhythm. So it's a 3-step polyrhythm, which, like I've said before on other videos I've produced, what this does is that every 3 steps it goes back to the start of the sequence, where most of the drum sounds will be playing on a 16-step sequence and then going back to the start. So if you imagine you've got like 3 steps, then it goes back. So it always is kind of out of time with everything else, but because of it being on 3 steps, if you imagine, if you count it, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, yeah, I can count, and then 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So basically, if you imagine it's doing 12 steps, and that's every time the 3 steps does 12 steps, it's in time with the kick drum, because the kick drum is playing on 4/4. So obviously if you kick is hitting, wrong one. If you're kick is just basically hitting on the 1, 5, 9, yep. So 1, 5, yep. So basically it's hitting on there. Obviously it hits there and then it goes back to the start. So it's just literally like that. It's just really simple when you think of it in a step sequencer sense, rather than trying to think of it as just being its own individual thing. It's where does it fall on a 4/4. So if you just listen to the kick and the polyrhythm together. And that's that. And I've also added, if you look at this, I've processed this in a way where I've taken off a attack transient so that it's not too clicky. I didn't quite like it being too clicky, so I just turned the attack up, so it just took that off. I compressed it a bit because I just like to add a bit of a pop to it. I also added a reverb to it, which I selected that algorithm, and I EQ'd it so that it's just doing all the low end. So I've taken off all the tops, I've taken off a little bit of the low lows, and I've just made it sound a bit more like a rumble, to be honest. After that, I've sidechained it off the 909 kick, and then I've just EQ'd it and just took off the low lows, everything below. Well, it's 31. It's 31.9 kilohertz. It's just hertz it's taken off. So yeah, that's it pretty much for that sound. For the next polyrhythm, this is actually on a 5-step. So again, if you imagine it goes 5, 10, it just basically eventually it catches up with the kick drum. So if you listen to this soloed, this is just like a percussive sound that I found online in one of my sample packs I've got, and it sounds really, really interesting because it sounds a bit like it's a chord coming from a synth, but it's not. It's just a percussive sound that I've just shortened, which you can get some really, really cool sounds by just taking drum sounds and shortening them or pitching them down and just really messing around with them, and you can get some like really interesting like chord type sounds from them, especially when you like EQ them like I've done here, where I've took all the low off, scooped off a bit of the top, I've put a reverb on which is just doing like the sort of mid-range, and yeah, just an interesting algorithm for it, which was the textures harmonic change, which is just built into Ableton. And yep, so if I just play these two together, you can hear how the 3-step and 5-step play with each other. So you see one's doing the top, one's doing the bottom. I've made it so low tom's doing all the bottom end, and then that percussive sound is just doing all the top. So they're really spread out in the audio spectrum. Then the final sound that I've used is I've actually used an 808 rim shot, which is just an absolute classic for any of these sort of drum type minimal tracks, that a DJ using a set as a drum tool. So all I've done for this is I have compressed it, and then I've done that to just bring out a bit of a transient at the start while getting rid of some of the decay. And then I've just EQ'd all the bottom end off and a little scoop at the top, and that's it pretty much. And it's just playing a, what is that? It's a 7. Yeah, it's just playing a 7-step sequence. So obviously 7 steps, goes back to the start. That it's another one where it eventually catches up with the kick drum, but because we're all playing different step like polyrhythms, and with different steps, they eventually all meet each other at some point. So it's like this loop where, if you imagine a vortex, it's kind of going round and round and round. Eventually they like link up and combined, and it just sounds really interesting. Like if you imagine a modular sequence on a Euro rack or something, where a lot of these step sequences people use nowadays, they don't generally just use straight 16-step sequences, they'll use odd rhythms like this because they might patch it in a certain way. So by doing this, you can make your sound a bit more modular sounding, for the lack of a better explanation. So it's quite a modern sound, I would say. And yep, so this is just everything together, and that is it.